Billionaires trusted him, governments praised him, and investors poured in billions. This is a story of Allen Stanford and how he created one of the largest Ponzi schemes in the world, scamming investors out of over $8 billion. Chapter 1. Allen Stanford's Vision. Allen Stanford's rise began with modest roots. After dabbling in real estate and construction ventures in Texas, Stanford was inspired by the success of offshore banking and tax havens. In the early 1980s, he relocated to a small Caribbean island called Montserrat, where he established his first bank. The idea was simple but bold: capitalize on lenient banking regulations to offer financial products that promised high returns and privacy, both highly attractive to wealthy investors. However, Montserrat soon fell under tighter regulatory scrutiny after allegations of money laundering within its banking sector. In response, Stanford saw a new opportunity. He moved his operations to another Caribbean island called Antigua, which welcomed him with open arms. Antigua, eager to attract foreign capital, offered a regulatory environment even more favorable than Montserrat, giving Stanford the perfect setting to establish the Stanford International Bank, also known as the SIB. This was the start of a financial empire. Stanford positioned himself as a visionary banker who could offer clients returns far higher than those of traditional banks, returns that would become the cornerstone of his scheme. Chapter 2. Building Credibility and Trust. Stanford International Bank marketed its certificates of deposit, CDs, aggressively, offering interest rates as high as 8–12%, far above industry averages. This was one of the primary ways the firm attracted its initial investors. Investors were told that the funds would be placed in diversified, liquid investments such as stocks, bonds, and precious metals, guaranteeing safety with handsome returns. The marketing strategy focused heavily on exclusivity and prestige, targeting high-net-worth individuals who wanted privacy, steady returns, and the prestigious idea of international banking. Stanford's group created an image of exclusivity by presenting the bank as a trusted financial partner for elite investors, those savvy enough to escape traditional, low-yield markets. Some of the most recognizable tactics included targeting affluent professionals. Wealthy investors, especially retirees, athletes, and celebrities, were courted. High-profile meetings and networking events allowed Stanford to mingle with influential figures. Though many investors' names were kept confidential, it's known that sports stars, such as professional golfers, and even former politicians were linked to the scheme. Sports sponsorships. One of the group's key strategies involved sponsoring international cricket tournaments in Antigua. Stanford went so far as to create the Stanford 2020 cricket tournament, putting up a $20 million prize, the largest ever in cricket history. This garnered global media attention, giving the company an air of legitimacy and associating it with prestige. Luxury events and lifestyle branding. Stanford hosted lavish parties, corporate retreats, and exclusive investment seminars. Investors were flown to Antigua or Houston, where they were treated to extravagant accommodations and personal attention, further convincing them that they were dealing with a legitimate, world-class financial institution. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Growth. Stanford's group expanded aggressively, opening offices around the world, including Houston, Miami, and Latin American countries, like Venezuela and Colombia. These locations helped the firm tap into new markets, attracting wealthy clients from regions where financial regulations were weak and returns from traditional investments were low. They also utilized a network of financial advisors, brokers, and wealth managers who received high commissions for bringing in new clients. Stanford's teams were instructed to emphasize the safety and security of the CDs, bolstering their pitch with claims of SIB's diversified investments and long-standing success. The firm even created glossy reports and fake financial audits, showing fabricated profits and reserves to reassure investors. Clients were given online access to their accounts, where they saw returns steadily growing, reinforcing the illusion that their money was safe. Some investors even received payouts when they requested withdrawals, though these payments came from new investments, not legitimate returns. Stanford's empire snowballed. By 2008, the company claimed to manage over $8 billion in assets. But just as Allen Stanford believed his empire was untouchable, cracks began to form beneath the surface. The illusion he had crafted so meticulously began to collapse. and the lavish life he thought would last forever spiraled out of control. Chapter 4. Rumors of fraud. Despite the company's glamorous reputation, red flags began surfacing as early as the late 1990s. Some former employees warned regulators that Stanford's promised returns were suspiciously high. However, the SEC, responsible for investigating the group, failed to act decisively. In one of the most controversial twists, reports would later reveal that the SEC had investigated Stanford as early as 1997 but took no action. Several whistleblower complaints were filed, but the company's reputation and influence seemed to shield it from scrutiny. Meanwhile, in Antigua, Stanford developed deep ties with government officials, even funding political campaigns and charitable efforts to secure their loyalty. The lack of regulatory intervention enabled Stanford to continue raising funds. Investors remained unaware that their money was not invested as promised, but was being used to fund Stanford's luxurious lifestyle, pay off earlier investors, and maintain the image of solvency. Chapter 5. Global Financial Crisis and Investor Panic. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit, and Stanford's empire began to unravel. As markets crashed, nervous investors rushed to withdraw their funds, demanding the liquidity they had been promised. However, Stanford International Bank's money reserves simply didn't exist. Under increasing pressure, the firm could no longer keep up with the withdrawals. The house of cards was about to fall. Chapter 6. How the scheme was exposed. In February 2009, after receiving credible information about the company's insolvency, the SEC acted swiftly. Federal agents raided Stanford Financial Group's headquarters in Houston, freezing the firm's assets. Investigators discovered that almost all of the $8 billion in assets that the company claimed to hold was missing or misappropriated. The supposed profits from CDs were entirely fabricated. Stanford was arrested in June 2009 in Virginia, charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. His chief financial officer, James Davis, agreed to cooperate with investigators, revealing that they had been falsifying financial records for years. Davis's testimony was crucial in exposing the inner workings of the scheme and proving Stanford's guilt. Chapter 7. The Trial. Stanford's trial was a media sensation. Victims from across the globe testified about the devastating losses they had suffered, with some individuals losing their entire life savings. Prosecutors painted a picture of Stanford as a master manipulator who lived in a bubble of extravagance, utterly indifferent to the ruin left in his wake. Despite overwhelming evidence, Stanford remained defiant, claiming that the government had destroyed his company and that the collapse was due to external economic conditions, not fraud. However, the jury was not convinced. In 2012, Allen Stanford was convicted on 13 out of 14 charges, including wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 110 years in federal prison. James Davis, having cooperated with authorities, received a reduced sentence. The aftermath: devastation for investors. Though the U.S. government launched efforts to recover some of the lost funds, only a fraction of the billions was ever returned to the victims. Many investors were left broke, and lawsuits against Stanford's financial advisors and affiliated companies dragged on for years, with limited success. The scandal also led to increased scrutiny of offshore banking practices and inspired calls for tighter financial regulations. However, for many victims, the damage was irreversible. Chapter 8. Legacy. The Stanford Financial Group's collapse stands as one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history, second only to Bernie Madoff's fraud in scale. The scandal exposed not only the dangers of unchecked greed, but also significant failures in regulatory oversight. It serves as a cautionary tale, reminding investors and regulators alike of the importance of vigilance and transparency. If you found this story interesting, I know you'll love the video on screen now about Nestle, how they went from a company that abused child labor and extreme social backlash to the largest food conglomerate in the world. Tap the video now to watch. See you there.